Does anybody have any questions about social issues? These would include abortion, euthanasia, contraceptives, virginity, homosexuality, really nice light topics like that. And do you have anything to get the ball rolling, get this party started, get the show on the road?
Well, I think when I was approached to come here this evening and to speak with you, was to speak a bit about the challenges that face students who are believers within the milieu where not everybody shares your faith, you know? And that's a real challenge, right? Most of us have grown up in believing families, and so, you know, you're at home and your parents teach you the faith and the values of the Catholic Church and everything, and you grow up with that. But when you get out into the work world, when you get out into more advanced grades in school, what happens is that not everybody agrees with that. And you find yourself being challenged very often, you know. And in those challenges, sometimes people say things and you kind of go, yeah, well, maybe they're right, but I don't want to hear that. Or sometimes you go, no, that can't be right, but you don't know how to address that. And sometimes you feel belittled because sometimes people who challenge you, they do it in a very not nice way, you know, and so that you're told that you're kind of stupid to believe this or to do this, or some people put you down and they call you names. And so there's all of that that's around there when you're kind of dealing with people who don't share your convictions or your faith. And so this evening, I think what we want to do is take time to address how do I approach that? How do I, live that? Do I, particularly as a student in the classroom setting or in the school, in the cafeteria, in the gym, when topics come up, how do I deal with those? Right? That's what we wanted to talk about. So maybe I'll throw what I'd like to do maybe as a first step is just throw back to you. You know, when people say things that you, as a member of the Catholic Church, as a believer, you know, you say, "Oh no, I don't necessarily agree with that." Or when people challenge you, or when people put you down, like, kind of, how do you react? What are your strategies? What do you think about, or what goes through your mind, or what do you say? You know, shall we open it up that way for a few minutes? Yeah. Okay. So let's just open it up a few minutes. So if anybody has any comments or thoughts about what I'm talking about, do you want to just raise your hand and we'll give you the mic so that you can, say a few things. Okay. So you understand what I'm saying, right? Do you? Yeah. Okay. So at the back there. What I'm going to do is this. 2 by 2, okay? Everybody find a partner, 2 by 2. And I want you, just with somebody, with that person who's with you, just say, like, one situation where you kind of were challenged in your faith and how you reacted. You want to do that? Okay? 2 by 2. One situation where you were challenged in your faith and how you reacted. Just do that, 2 by 2. Okay, so I'm going to stop you there, all right? Everybody turn back to the front. Okay, so now that you've told the person next to you an example or something, would some of you like to share it with the group? Something you've told the person next to you. Anybody? May the best looking one speak first. Well, there you go, right here, there you go.
Can I sit down?
Yeah, you can.
Okay, well, Nan and Matt and I were just talking, and I had a similar experience to Nan was during Frosh Week, where I went to a General Assembly, and there were these people that came on and they were telling us about contraception and about free sex. And they brought out dolls and were showing maneuvers and stuff like that, and stuff that I was just really shocked by. So I had to actually get up and walk out because it was really insulting. So yeah, it was not cool.
Yeah. Anybody else? An example?
I'm going to pick at random.
The second best looking one? There you go. Go ahead.
Well, we kind of find that, like, our group of friends at school, like, it's okay, so we didn't really.
So you haven't experienced that. What I'm talking about, you haven't experienced?
Not at school. Yeah, most of our friends understand.
So where have you experienced something like that where you've been challenged because you're...
Well, we just have general discussions. Like, we all share our opinions, but it's not really a debate. It's more like understanding.
So the times where you've had that, there's been respect, is what
Yeah.
you're saying. It's been respectful. Okay, very good. Anybody else? Oh, back here. People who sit in the last row are usually troublemakers, but that's no. Just kidding.
One of the things that, wow, it's really loud, that Dan and I were talking about was not necessarily face-to-face how we saw a problem or have been in a problem, but more in a group and even just overhearing it, like not knowing if you should step in and kind of speak up or, take it in. And, we were just kind of joking, like, do you start saying a blessing over them or something? Because, you feel bad not saying anything, and then you walk away thinking, should I have been a part of that conversation in a good way, maybe giving some advice that was more from our hearts kind of thing. So.
Very good. Thank you. Anybody else? Oh, well, yeah.
We didn't have a chance. I didn't think that was her thing. But for me, it's more so my friends don't really understand it, so they're kind of afraid of it almost. So they just don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
So they just avoid it and stuff.
All right. So it's kind of a taboo subject. We don't talk about God or about religion. Yeah. Right. Anybody else? Anybody else? Oh, one at the back here.
Well, I have some friends, and they're kind of like two-faced. Like, if I talk to them about church and stuff, and it's like, they're like, that's interesting, and then they go around telling people, oh man, I don't trust in that stuff and all that. So.
Yeah. So what you're finding is with you, they're kind of saying yeah, but then they turn around and they kind of put down what you're standing up for. Yeah, that happens too, huh? I'll tell you a few experiences about that I was in. I remember being in high school. At one point, we had a course called ethics, and in that class, at one point, we were invited to bring in quotes or things that we had read that were meaningful to us or something. And I remember at one point bringing in a text from one of the saints, and I read it, and everybody, oh God, ever boring, kind of the class, So a bit later on, I brought in another text, and it was from another saint, but I didn't say that. I said it was from the writings of a Hindu scholar, from the 8th century. And everybody went, oh, ever interesting. Wow, a Hindu scholar said that. And then I said, no, it was a saint. And, so it was a way of kind of showing them their own prejudice, because they were prejudiced just because it was a saint that said it couldn't be any good. And like they all went, oh, like it was a kind of my way of telling them, guys, like you say you're not prejudiced, but sometimes you are. Other times it was the other way. I remember in first year university, when I was studying music, there was a girl from my city, where I grew up in Timmins, and she was from Timmins, and so we were both at the Faculty of Music, and we hung around a bit together, because we were from the same city and we knew each other a bit. But she started going to a group called Inter-Varsity Christian Fellowship, which is an evangelical fellowship of university students. And one day she told me, you're going to hell. And I looked at her, I said, I'm going to hell? Why? Because you're Catholic and Catholics are all going to hell. And I said, why are Catholics going to hell? Because you don't believe in Jesus. I said, I don't believe in Jesus. No, you believe in the sacraments and in the Pope, and you can't be saved by sacraments and the Pope. You can only be saved by Jesus. And I said, but I don't understand. I believe in Jesus. I think Jesus, acts through the sacraments. I think Jesus teaches through the Pope, but my faith isn't in the Pope. It's in Jesus. No, you're going to hell. And I was so stunned, like here was a friend who was telling me I'm going to hell because I'm Catholic, and she was doing that because she was this group had convinced her that if you were Catholic, then there was something terribly wrong with you. And you know what happened? It broke our friendship. and there was no way that I was able to rebuild that friendship. It just wasn't possible. And so she went her way and I went mine. And I realized then the saying of Jesus in the gospel, where Jesus says, "Don't believe I've come to bring peace to all situations." You know, I'm coming to bring division because of me there will be divisions between friends and friends, between fathers and sons, and between mothers and daughters, and between brothers and sisters, because of the choices we make. At one point, we have to realize that there are some friendships we have to let go of. You know, because and it was the same thing with there was one guy that was a friend of mine. I really liked him, and I liked spending time with him, but he started getting into drugs and into heavier and heavier drugs and everything, and he was trying to get me to try stuff, and I wouldn't. And at one point I just decided I couldn't be his friend anymore, because the stuff that he was doing was just so foreign to what my values were about. And I realized that had become his priority in life, and so that broke our friendship. And those are some of the choices you have to make. So anyway, I think what I'm trying to say is that as you journey in life, if you're going to be faithful, in a sense that if you're going to try to live your commitment as the Christian, as a Catholic, you're going to face situations where you're going to have to make choices, where you're going to have to, speak up. And I'll give you an example that really struck me once about speaking up in a way, and this was in the work world, okay? I had a friend who was working in a mine, and he was an older man. He was in his 50s, and in this shop that he worked on in the mine, the shop steward, the guy who was in charge of the shop, he was into pornography. And he would buy these magazines, and he'd cut out pictures, and he'd put the pictures up on the wall where they would have lunch. And my friend just, how do you deal with that and everything? And so one day he was working overtime, and he tore all the pictures down, and he threw them in the garbage. And the guy came in the next day and saw that his pictures were torn down. He turned to my friend and he said, "You're the who tore my pictures down, And he said, yeah, I did. And he said, "How dare you? How dare you? Those were my pictures and everything." And my friend looked at him. He says, "What you don't know is one of the girls that was in those pictures is my daughter." And the guy went, "What?" "Well, one of them is my daughter. She ran away from home, and she's in the pornography business now. And when I saw her, I had to take the pictures down, And the guy said, "Oh God, I'm so sorry. Oh God, if I had known, I would never. Oh, I'm so sorry, And then my friend looked at him and he said, "Well, to tell you the truth, I don't have any daughters." And the guy says, "What? What, are you messing with my head or something?" He says, No, listen to my point though. All those girls are somebody's daughter. They're somebody's daughter. And you should never forget that." The guy never put up any pornography up on his walls after that. So that was a creative way of changing a situation. A workplace that was not living gospel values, that was a creative way of doing it. I think he was inspired by the Holy Spirit to come up with that, really, because that was a pretty touchy situation. But I think as believers, we're faced with that, and we have to kind of live up to that.
The second question that we have is dealing with people of different religions. How do we, in our schools or even other Christian denominations, how do we approach people of different faiths? You kind of catching on that, but what do we say? How do we defend our own faith?
Yeah.
How do we?
So I would say, first of all, I've never liked the expression "defend my faith" personally. I don't need to defend my faith. I don't need to defend God. God is strong enough to take care of God's self, So I don't have to feel, I should never feel I'm in a fight. What I've found is that if it becomes an argument, I walk away. There's no point arguing about religion, okay? There's no point arguing about it, because when you start arguing, nobody's listening anymore. And what's the point? You're going to bash somebody over the head until they say yes. There's no point. So if you get into an argument about religion, I walk away. I said, if you want to talk about religion, I'll be interested in understanding your point of view. if you're interested in understanding mine. It's a bit like what you were saying, if it's a discussion, if it's an exchange, then it's fine. So for example, there's a Muslim couple that lives behind here. I've been to their house a few times. We've had some wonderful discussions, exchanges, particularly, for example, when I started speaking about the pilgrimage that I was going to do this summer, and the Muslims, one of the rules of the Muslims, the 5 rules that they follow, is that they have to do, if they can, once in their lifetime, do a pilgrimage to Mecca. So they started speaking to me about the pilgrimage to Mecca, and then they gave me notes about how they do pilgrimage so that I could compare my pilgrimage to their pilgrimage. That's really interesting. I find that really interesting. There's respect there. We're trying to see where our similarities are, where our differences are, and everything, Now, I realize that there are points where we can't discuss, because I believe that Jesus is the living Son of God. And they don't. They see Jesus as one of the prophets and Muhammad as a greater prophet. But I don't see that, So when we don't get into that, because we know we're going to disagree about that. But what we try to do is see where we agree. How do you pray? How do I pray? How do you celebrate a wedding? How do we celebrate a wedding? What values do you have, concerning certain issues? What values do I have? So I think when you have exchanges, discussions like that, I think that's really, really worthwhile. And sometimes it's easier to do that with somebody from another religion than from another Christian church. I was at a bar mitzvah once. Do you know what a bar mitzvah is? It's Jesse was at a bar mitzvah? Well, girls have bat mitzvahs because bar mitzvah means a son of the law and bat mitzvah means a daughter of the law. So anyway, the bar mitzvah is a ceremony for a Jewish young man or a young woman who's entering adulthood, and they become official members of the synagogue then when they're at this age. So I had a friend whose daughter was doing her bat mitzvah. So I was invited to the bat mitzvah. And I went, and it was a beautiful ceremony. And afterwards, he sat me down at a table of Jewish rabbis, and Jewish scholars. So here I was the one Catholic bishop with these 5 men who are all rabbis or scholars of the Jewish tradition. And we had a great conversation, a wonderful conversation. And this is a very orthodox branch of Judaism, very traditional branch of Judaism. And at one point, one of them looked up and he said, "Is it ever funny, huh? Here we are talking with this bishop, this Catholic bishop, and we can have a wonderful, respectful conversation. But if I sat down with a Reform rabbi, we'd be tearing each other's beards out, And I looked at him and I said, well, don't worry, like an evangelical Christian once told me that I'm going to hell, So, and then one of them says, my father always said, you always fight with those who are closest to you. You always fight with those who are closest to you. And sometimes that's true. With other Christians, it's difficult because we all claim to be following Jesus, but some follow Jesus. They put emphasis on one aspect of Jesus' teaching and they forget other aspects of Jesus' teaching. Recently, I don't know if you're aware, but in the news, just a month ago, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith in Rome, which is a group of bishops that is, their job is to make sure that the teaching of the church is clear. They clearly said that we believe as Christians, as Catholics, that the fullness of the church is in the Catholic Church, and that the other Christian churches don't have the fullness of the means of salvation. Some of them don't have sacraments. Some of them don't have, the teaching authority of bishops and of the Pope. Some of them don't have, attention to certain aspects of the church's teaching and everything. Well, that was really insulting to the Anglicans and to the Presbyterians, and they're saying, what? You're saying that we're not, full Christians and everything, and so that hurts, huh? And it gets into big arguments, and that's where you get into a lot of tension with other Christians. But again, I think that what's important with other Christians is to remember, first of all, we all share the same baptism. We all share the same faith in the same Lord Jesus. We all believe that salvation comes through Jesus. And we all believe that God's word is in Scripture, and we want to follow that word. And we share so much with them that if we focus on what we do share, we can pray with them. We can stop, we can pray with them. We can take time to share our faith, to speak about who Jesus is for us. When you get at that level, that's where real dialogue is possible with other Christians. I really believe that. I was at an ecumenical festival once, and we were in a discussion group. There were 10 of us, and we were talking about how we prayed. And each one of us was talking about our prayer and everything. And at the end of the talk, and it was wonderful because it was so enriching, at the end of it, I said, could I ask a question? Maybe we're not supposed to ask this question, but I'd like to ask a question. They said, what? I said, could I ask which churches you belong to? Like, I'm Catholic. And the woman next to me said, well, I'm Anglican. The other one said, well, I'm Presbyterian. The next one said, I'm Evangelical. And the other one says, well, I'm Pentecostal. And the other one said, I'm Orthodox. We were all from different Christian churches, but we had all been speaking about our prayer life. And when you speak about your prayer life, you know, you're talking about something that's true and important for you, and it was very enriching. So I think that's how we can share our experiences. But when it comes to arguments, walk away from an argument. That's my big teaching. Walk away from an argument. All right?
The next topic we're going to talk about, I'm going to start it a little differently. Who here has to deal with, either in their life or in family members' lives or in friends' lives, people who go out drinking a lot? Okay. Who here deals with people who sex is a major part of their life? Who here deals with people where drugs is a major part of their life? Okay. And so when you see that, you're really wondering about their behavior, so our next question is asking you, who do you hang out with and what do they do, and how does that reflect in your life? So I'll hand it over to you.
My own thought on this is that it's very important that your main friends share your values, okay? That your main group of friends share your values. I believe that. Because if your main group of friends doesn't share your values, they're going to have power over you. You know, if I hang out with 4 people who are all into drinking heavily, and every Friday and Saturday night they're out to get drunk, and I'm going out with them, well, what's going to happen after a while is I'm going to start drinking more and more. I mean, it's inevitable. So you really have to look at who your main friends are. Now, if your main friends are people who share your values, then you can afford to have a friend or two who don't share your values, because then your main group of friends supports you. And then you can be a support for that person. You can challenge them. You can invite them to maybe think about what they're doing. You can be with them and not necessarily be dragged along with them, you know? If most of my friends are not doing drugs and I'm not doing drugs, and I find myself going with another friend to a party and they're passing around some stuff, and I say, no, I don't do that. You know, you have the strength to do that because your main group of friends, they support you in that. Does that make sense what I'm saying? So for me, I think that's what's very important. If your main group of friends does not share your values, that's where you have to ask yourself, am I hanging around with the right people? That's where you have to ask yourself. Question.
How about for those of us like myself? I'm going off to university, and I have nobody that I know that is going. So how do you obviously I have friends here that share the same values, but how do you put yourself into a situation where you don't know anybody, and you're trying to make new friends? Right.
So that's a very good question. So it's like I have a brother. I have 6 brothers, right? 5 brothers. Sorry, we're 6 guys in my family. I have 5 brothers, so I can talk about my brothers. You'll never know which one I'm talking about. But one of my brothers, you know, he had gone out for a long time with this girl, and they broke up and everything. And he was in the work world at this point, and so he really wanted to find somebody special, right? And so He was telling me one day, he says all the girls I'm meeting, he says, oh God, he says, I don't, they're kind of nice and everything to chat with, but once you get at a certain level, you realize that there's something missing, and I'm not finding the right person. And I said, well, where are you meeting these women? He said, well, in bars. And I said, well, I'm not saying that all the women who go to a bar are not okay. That's not what I'm saying. But if you want to find a lamb, you don't go to the wolf's den, right? If you want to find somebody who shares your values, then you have to go to a place where your values are being lived. And I said to him, like, and I know my brother, I said, you're involved, you're a very generous man, and you really believe in helping young people. Why don't you join a movement that helps young people, like, the scouting movement or Big Brothers and Big Sisters, where you'll find yourself with other people of your age who are helping young people. There you'll find people who are sharing your values. And then you'll be able to kind of connect. You have a better chance of connecting with somebody who's kind of on your wavelength. So, let's say you're going to university. Well, when I went to university, I went to the University of Western Ontario. One of the first things I did was I looked up to see if there was a Catholic club at the university, and there was. It was called the Newman Center, and a lot of universities have Newman Centers. And so I went to the Newman Center and I started hanging around there, and I found people that were great to hang around with, who shared my values and my faith, and there are friendships there that are still existing today. Some of them came to my ordination, and like there are a couple that we still write to each other. So those friendships I think were really important. And there are other kind of university-based clubs that have those values. Or for example, you could join a university club that is involved with social justice, or with with third world issues, or with ecology. And you go to those clubs where they're not there just to kind of, navel gaze, but they're there because they believe in a cause, and it's a cause you believe in. You'll find people that share that with you. You got to make that step. What's going on here?
I just thought what you said was hilarious. I never heard the term navel gaze before.
You've never heard the term navel gazing?
No.
Has anybody heard the term navel gazing here before?
I thought it was genius.
Older people, huh? Il se regarde le nombril. Oh, is it a French expression? Oh. Well, anyway. Let me explain navel gazing. This is your navel. Navel gazing means you're kind of self-centered. You're only thinking about yourself. You're focused on yourself. That's what it means. Sorry about that. Okay.
It's okay.
But if you look for groups that have a cause, but then, you have to make that first step. And that first step, I got to say, is hard, especially when you're coming from a high school. Like you're coming out of high school, you were in elementary school and you were with friends, and then you get to high school and the kind of same friends, and sometimes another group comes along and you kind of move, but it kind of grows naturally. All of a sudden, when you're thrown out there, it doesn't come by itself. You cannot afford to be passive. You must be active. You have to say, I will find people that share my values, and I will go to this group or to that group. And don't give up if, let's say you go to the Newman Club, like I did, and that it's boring, and that there's nobody that's interesting, and that nothing's working. Don't give up. Say, well, that group isn't. I'll try another group. And keep going until you find one that does make sense. Finally, another thing is that if you're at university and you have options that you can take, at certain universities of Catholic colleges, take an option in religion in a Catholic college. If you can take an option. And so that way, one thing, you'll be reflecting on your faith, and you'll also be meeting people who want to reflect on their faith too. Okay? Does that help? Very good.
Just to kind of add on to that, for any of the teens that are still in high school, make sure that you're also being involved in things in your schools. I know you come to Life Teen because you're here, so I guess this is a great way to meet other people of your faith, but also just making sure that you're involved in places within even your own high school, and like there's social clubs, there's chaplains at the schools. We got one back there. Schools. In the Catholic schools. So make sure you're involved with that as well. You meet people there too.
Yeah, so if you're in a Catholic school, hang out at the chaplaincy office, you know? L'aumônerie, l'animation pastorale, hang out there, okay? Yeah.
So now it's time for recess. So you got, we're going to have some snacks that are going to be handed out. So it is recess time. Yeah. We are going to do with, we're going to get on with our second period class. The second period class that we're going to be talking about, I guess I have some questions for you, okay? How many people here, by a show of hands, find it very difficult to find music that doesn't have questionable lyrics in it? How many, I'll rephrase it. How many people find it very difficult to find music that doesn't, or that other people aren't listening to as well? So music that people are listening to with questionable lyrics. Is that a big thing in your life? Like, do you find your friends listen to music with, questionable lyrics? It's hard to, like, go into the stores and not listen to it, or go somewhere where the public is and not hear it. So we're going to touch a little bit about that, as well as just media in general. So, like, what are the shows that we're watching? Is it hard to find television that we can and maybe should watch? And it also includes, like, magazines and literature. What are we reading? What are we taking in? So.
Big questions. Yes. Oh, thank you for the 2 apples. Give him an A+. Martin said somebody told him to come down because it'd be an interesting evening, and he said, is the second half going to be interesting? That's my friend. That's my friend. It's a good thing I have another circle of friends that supports me in my values, allows me to hang out with this kind of friend, Detention, yes, detention. So just to make things clear, we got another half hour together there. So with some of these questions, just to let you know. But okay, so the issue here is music, film, literature, TV, what you're watching. At one point, I remember when I was teaching religion, high school religion. I was a teacher for 5 years. So anyway, I tried. I hope I wasn't like you, but. But you can get better, Anyway, I got another. Anyway, so I remember at one point I wrote down a number of words. I wrote money, power, pleasure, looks, honesty, friendship, health, spirituality, and caring. And I wrote down 10 words, and I asked my students. I said, I want you to think of the television programs you watch, and think of the storylines and the actors and everything. And I want you to put down in order of importance those 10 words. Putting 10 for the most important word for the people in these movies and in these films that you watch. Like, so put 10 for the most important, 9 for the second, write down to 1. So obviously, like, spirituality was, right at the bottom, 1, because who on TV speaks about spirituality, right? Unless you watch Seventh Heaven, But anyway, but very few people, but money and pleasure and power, they were right up there and everything. And then I said, now you're going to do the same exercise thinking about Jesus. So write down for Jesus what was most important, Well, what happened was that the lists were exactly contrary. What was most important for Jesus was least important for the TV programs. What was most important for the TV programs was least important for Jesus. And I asked them what conclusions they took from that. Well, the first conclusion they took was that, well, what we're watching on TV isn't influenced very much by the Gospels, and it certainly doesn't portray it. First conclusion. Second conclusion, if I watch this all the time, my mind is shaping itself according to those values instead of gospel values. I might go to church 1 hour a week. I might go to Life Team 3 hours a week, but I'm watching, how many hours of TV a day do I watch? Well, what's the average? How many people watch 2 hours a day of TV here? On an average. How many watch less than 2 hours a day? How many watch more than 2 hours a day? Oh, a few, huh? So what happens is if you're watching 2 hours a day, that turns out to 14 hours a week. Studies have shown that the average teenager watches 21 hours a week of TV. Okay, so you're 21 hours in front of the TV, 1 hour in church. Which medium is going to affect your thinking more? It's going to be the media, right? And if the values of the media are all upside down from the gospel, it really poses a big question. Same thing with music. I mean, let's face it, pop music, and I listen to a lot of pop music, and but pop music takes it for granted that sex has nothing to do with love. Okay? So, sex is something you kind of do with whoever you kind of meet on the way that's kind of half good looking and, doesn't smell too bad, And so you just let's go to bed tonight, right? And then what happens, according to these songs, is if it kind of works out for a few nights, well, you might start dating the person. That's the way pop music works. That's the way pop music thinks. That's the way a lot of the movies work, So that way of thinking slowly gets into our minds, and we start taking it for granted that that's the normal way of thinking. And we start thinking that this is the way everybody thinks. But not everybody thinks this way. Not everybody has these values. So what happens here is we have to make serious choices about the music we listen to, the movies we watch. The choices we make about this are very, very important. Video games. Ask yourself the question, what values are presented in this video game that I'm playing? Well, I'm not saying don't play any video games that are violent. What I'm saying is that if you're spending 3 hours a day playing a violent video game and you're coming back to it all the time, what's happening is you're becoming used to violence. You think that violence is a normal way of dealing with the world. You become inured to it. I'm not saying don't go see a James Bond movie. I'm not saying don't go see Die Hard 4. But I'm saying when you do, be aware of the difference between what you're watching as an entertainment and the values that are yours as a person who believes in Jesus Christ, who's the King of Peace. So you have to make sure that you're not being shaped by those values. The problem, and it's a real problem, is that we get shaped by this without realizing it. That's the problem. We get shaped by the media without realizing it. And we take for granted that that's the way it should be. I'll give an example, concrete example. Right now, I watch TV. I think every major TV show has at least one gay person that's on the program. And this person is a great person, and they're wonderful people. And there's no doubt that gay people often are wonderful people. But the reality is that the percentage of gay people in society is very, very small. All right? How come on every program there's one? It's as if people in Hollywood have kind of decided that this is going to become the new normal, and it doesn't reflect the reality that is the reality of our world, So I'm not saying this, please understand me, I'm not saying this in order to put down homosexual people. But what I'm saying is that in the media right now, there's a kind of a glorification of the gay lifestyle that really begs a lot of questions. And of course, if in the general media point of view, sex has nothing to do with love or commitment or having children, well then that's the portrayal that they have about homosexuals too, right? So who are we being shaped by in our way of thinking? The media? The music we listen to? The films we're watching? Or are we being shaped by the gospel and the teaching of the church? It's a big, big question, and we have to reflect on it. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? All right? Now, please, I'm not saying, on the other hand, I'm not saying let's build ourselves a ghetto and I'm just going to listen to Christian music and I'm just going to watch Little House on the Prairie and I'm just going to read the only literature I'll read is C.S. Lewis. That would be a mistake. Let's not pretend that we can kind of build a Catholic world and we can pull up all the drawbridges and keep the bad world out there. That's not what I'm saying at all. I think we have to be in the world. I really do. Jesus said in a prayer that he said, he's speaking about his disciples, he says to God the Father, he says, I'm praying for those who believe in my name. I ask you not to take them out of the world, but keep them not of the world. So what he's saying is that we have to be in the world without being of the world. Does that make sense? In the world without being of the world. So you have to be engaged with the world as it is, but you have to make sure that it's not the world that it's influencing you. You are influencing the world. All right? There we go.
Just to kind of add to that, I also heard a really famous person say, I can't remember who it was, but he always says this thing, he says garbage in, garbage out. And I just think it's really funny. If anyone knows who it is, let me know. No, but it's not Oscar the Grouch. But he does say garbage in, garbage out, which is kind of what you're saying, Bishop, is that if you fill yourself with garbage, then all you have to give to other people's garbage, and then you're living of the world. Yeah.
So let me give you a concrete example. High school English. There was a woman who called me because she was very, very upset that her son in grade 13 back then, so grade 12 now, was studying Somerset Maughams of Human Bondage in English literature in high school. Anybody ever read that in high school English literature? Anyway, Somerset Maugham of Human Bondage. And it was a Catholic school. And she said, and this book is about adultery, and this should not be part of the curriculum in a Catholic high school. And this is where I feel that's like the mentality, let's draw up the drawbridge and we shouldn't read any of that. So I was saying, well, I don't think so, because I read Somerset Maughams of Human Bondage, and yes, there is adultery in it, and what the novel shows is that it leads to the person's demise and sadness, and his whole life gets torn up because of these crazy relationships that he gets in. So it's not a Christian book, but at the same time it's a book that shows the human reality and the toll that adultery is taking on this person's and other person's lives. So I said, I think your son should engage in that, should read that book, should be studying it, not to take the values of the author, but to be able to see how those values have an impact in life. So engage with the world. Don't say I'm not going to read something because the author isn't Christian. Read it, see what they have to say, see to understand it, but then see how your faith brings you to a different perspective. Okay.
Which leads into the second question we have in this is, what about things like schoolwork, things that teachers want us to do that we don't feel are of our Catholic values? Like you said, that book or things. So I think you kind of answered that, but
that'll happen more at university. Right? High school, I think teachers, as a general rule, don't get into topics that really, or they don't try to press upon you topics that would go against your faith. That'll happen more at university. And what is important there, I think, is to try to find ways, for example, if there's an assignment on a topic that you find very disturbing, I think you have the right to go speak to the teacher about the possibility of doing another assignment. That's you have the right to ask, at any rate. If the teacher insists, then you can ask to maybe do the assignment in a way that will allow you to deal with it without betraying your own values. And I think your story is very important. You want to share that story?
For people who don't know, I just finished my degree at school, and one of the things I did was a minor in education. And one of the classes I had to take was multicultural education, which is all about incorporating different faiths and beliefs and all that fun stuff. And one the project that I had to do, that was like a significant chunk of my final mark, like my big final project, was on incorporating homosexuality into the classroom, into your modern day curriculum. And I was kind of at a panic because I had no idea what to do. And it was a group project, so we were all assigned different aspects, which was lucky on my part. And so what I ended up doing was because I couldn't not do the project because it was my final project, it was my final mark. So what I did was I kept my part of the project to be a very factual part, like just no opinions were necessary on the part of the project that I did. I just kept everything fact-based, and that was it. And it worked out because I didn't feel like I was compromising what I believed to do this project.
And sometimes what's important is to do a bit of research. Sometimes, as Catholics, we can react. We can have a first reaction that is not the full mind of the Church. For example, if I had known that you were having that program, I would have said, "Do you know that the Ontario bishops have written a document on how to integrate homosexuals in the classroom in our Catholic schools?" And you would have said, "No, I didn't know that," right? You don't know that. But I know it because I was part of the writing team. And then I would have said, well, maybe what you'd like to do is do a project on how Catholic schools in Ontario are trying to integrate kids with same-sex attraction within the Catholic school. You know, so that would have allowed you to deal with the teacher's topic, but from a Catholic perspective, you know? But probably nobody in your education class knows that. So this is where when we're challenged, maybe we need to do a bit of research, maybe call the bishop, you know, and say, I have this assignment. Do you have an idea of how I could approach this from a Catholic perspective? So that's the kind of thing that you have to be creative when you're dealing with those kinds of issues. Or another example, a lot of Catholics, and I'm always doing this, a lot of Catholics believe, and this isn't, a lot of Catholics believe that the Church teaches that the world was created in 7 days, in 6 days, you know, because the Bible says it. And so then as a Catholic, you're not allowed to follow scientific research on evolution. Well, I don't know if you're aware of that, but that's a fundamentalist position that is taken by certain evangelical and Pentecostal groups. It is not the teaching of the Catholic Church. John Paul II once said that evolution is the best scientific theory that exists right now to help us understand how the world came to be. That's John Paul II. He's saying evolution is the best theory that exists right now that helps us understand how the world came to be. So if the Pope is saying that evolution makes sense, as a Catholic student, I shouldn't be saying, hey, evolution doesn't make sense. You know, the Pope said it does. You know? So what I'm saying is that sometimes it's important for us to allow ourselves to be challenged to go see what is the Church's teaching on a certain topic. Because I might have a first reaction that I think is the Church's position, but it's not necessarily so. So perhaps the challenge then is to go learn more about my faith, so then I can come back to answer the question that's being asked of me, or to work on the topic that's being given to me from a Catholic perspective. Does that make sense? All right? So I hope I didn't surprise anybody by saying it's okay to study evolution, right, as Catholics? All right? Does that make sense? Did you know that? Mm-hmm. Did you all know this? You didn't know this? Well, I'm telling you now, okay, mm-hmm. Right? The Catholic Church believes the 12 first chapters of the Bible are not historical truth. They are poetic truth. So poetic truth means that there's a lesson in there for us to be learned. But the first 12 chapters of the Bible do not describe how the world was made. All right? That's the teaching of the Catholic Church. Maybe one night I'll be able to go into that more in detail. All right.
And our last topic for the night is dealing with ourselves. How do we, or I'll say, how do you represent your image in your faith, in your family, at Life Team? How do you stay true to yourself and your Catholic beliefs when you go out into the real world? And Chantal wants to say something.
And on top of that is, who do you represent all the time. So kind of like bringing that to mind, like who are we representing as a person? So.
Yeah. If I can maybe give a small idea. Wherever you are, imagine Jesus is with you. You know, imagine Jesus is standing next to you. And how would you react to a certain situation? How would you speak? Would you tell this joke if Jesus was standing with you? Would you listen to this joke if Jesus was standing with you? Would you make this decision? Would you do this thing? Would you do that thing? If Jesus is with you, how would you act? And I'm saying imagine it because indeed he is. Jesus is with us all the time. We just forget it. So we need to make the exercise. Now, I remember a preacher saying that he had told some young people this trick kind of thing to imagine Jesus with you. And so he says that he had one student who was going to a party, and he got to the party and he put his hand on the front door, and he kind of turned around, nobody was there, and he said, Jesus, do you mind waiting here, on the porch for a couple of hours while I go into the party? Because if you really do imagine Jesus is with you, you're going to be making choices that maybe don't go with the flow. Huh? I think that's one way of making sure that you are being true to yourself and to your faith. Just be aware that God is with you. Now, God is with you not in a judging way. God is with you not in a way to condemn you. God is with you in a loving, merciful, and understanding way. Always remember that. God is with you not as a policeman checking to see if you're following all the rules. God is with you as a loving Father who wants nothing more than your happiness and your joy. That's what God wants. And so if you remember that, then you'll know that the choices that you're making are choices that are meant to bring you to true happiness and to true joy. For me, I think that's what's most important, is exercising an awareness of God's presence in my life. And I'll end by sharing with you an insight from my pilgrimage, okay? So I did this pilgrimage, and I've asked the Corps if in September, one of the evenings, I could come and just talk to you about my pilgrimage and show you pictures and stuff like that. And 16th of September. So the 16th of September, Life Night, I'm going to tell you about my pilgrimage. But one of the things that happened on my pilgrimage is I'm walking 8 hours a day, all right? I'm walking 8 hours a day, and most of the time, those 8 hours a day, I'm kind of alone, thinking to myself. Like, I'm walking with other people, but they're behind me or they're in front of me or something. So I'm walking by myself. Sometimes I have conversations with someone, for half an hour, but most of the time during the 8 hours, I'm silent. And as I'm walking, I'm thinking about life, I'm thinking about different issues and stuff like that. But sometimes I'm going uphill, and the uphill part is hard. And I'm breathing really, really hard. And so I'm not thinking about anything. And I'm just trying to get through the uphill part. And I don't know if you're like me. Well, I don't know if you've ever walked this much. But the thing is that the steps that your body makes starts putting a rhythm into your thinking. So you're going boom, 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 all the time. And this was kind of just, it was kind of getting annoying, that I had the noise of my steps making this rhythm. And then I said, I got to put something to this step to kind of make it meaningful. And this is a long way around to say that slowly I started developing a kind of a mantra, a kind of a saying that I repeated over and over and over again as I was walking. And the saying was this. It was in French, and it went with my walking, so the rhythm worked well. Jésus, mon Seigneur, mon Sauveur, mon ami, mon frère. Jésus, mon Seigneur, mon Sauveur, mon ami, mon frère. Jésus, mon Seigneur, mon Sauveur, mon ami, mon frère. I must have said this a gazillion times as I was walking, And what it means in English is Jesus, my Lord, my Savior, my friend, my brother. And the reason I chose those 4 titles was because I was meditating on the Gospel of John during my 30 days. And in the Gospel of John, Jesus is Lord. He's also Savior. He's also our friend because he says, I no longer call you servants, I call you friends. And he's our brother because he makes us children of God with him. And what happened is, as I'm doing this, as I'm walking along the way, this I repeated it so often that it's now kind of become part of, whenever I'm alone, whenever I'm quiet, whenever I'm doing something repetitive, it comes back, and in my heart it just starts going, Jesus, my Lord, my Savior, my brother, my friend, my brother. What I'm suggesting to you is if you found something like that, a thought that you could repeat within your heart when you're doing something, when you're alone, kind of a short prayer that you repeat when you're alone, when you're doing something repetitive, when you get up in the morning, when you go to bed at night, it helps you slowly develop a very deep consciousness that God is with you. And if you develop that consciousness that God is with you, then the choices you'll be making will reflect God's life within you. So that's what I'm sharing with you and offering to you as a thought, as a final thought, okay?
Thank you, Bishop.
There you go. Thank you.
Principal Bishop.